Welcome to True Soul Chronicles, where we explore what happens when wealth meets authenticity, when power kneels before kindness, and when the world's most successful people discover that the only thing money can't buy is genuine connection. Here, you'll meet billionaires who hide their fortunes to find real love, CEOs who disguise themselves as ordinary people to test humanity, and everyday heroes whose compassion reveals the true meaning of wealth. These aren't just stories about money, they're about moral courage, poetic justice, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the richest person in the room is the one serving coffee, raising a family on minimum wage, or choosing dignity over shortcuts. So settle in, grab your favorite drink, and prepare to witness a story that will remind you the size of your bank account means nothing compared to the size of your heart. Let's begin. The rain came down in sheets across River North, turning the cobblestone streets outside Siena Tavern into dark mirrors that reflected the warm glow of Edison bulbs and the cold reality of Alistair Vale's 14th failure at finding love. He sat alone at table 12, a corner booth positioned perfectly for people watching, but terrible for maintaining dignity. The table was small, intimate, designed for couples who leaned into each other's spaces, who shared bites of burrata and whispered secrets over Barolo. Alistair occupied it like a man awaiting sentencing, his water glass sweating condensation onto the white linen tablecloth, his hands folded in a posture that suggested prayer or resignation. 7:47 p.m. Victoria Harrington Cross was already 13 minutes late, but her absence filled the space more powerfully than her presence would. Alistair could feel the server's pitying glances, the way she slowed when passing his table, clearly debating whether to offer him bread or condolences. He looked the part he'd designed for himself. Eli Morgan, struggling freelance photo editor. The blazer was J. Crew from 2015, intentionally a size too large to suggest recent weight loss or limited budget for tailoring. The jeans had a frayed hem, not artfully distressed designer denim, but genuinely worn Levi's he'd purchased from a Goodwill in Lincoln Park and walked through puddles for 3 weeks to achieve the proper level of defeated authenticity. His watch was a $35 Timex with a cracked crystal face, the second hand stuttering every fourth tick like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. The messenger bag at his feet contained props: a 2017 MacBook Air with intentionally outdated software, a dog-eared copy of Susan Sontag's On Photography with Marginalia. He'd written himself in cheap ballpoint pen, and a smartphone with a cracked screen protector he maintained religiously despite owning a phone repair company through one of his subsidiary investments. You've become a method actor in the performance of poverty, he thought, watching his reflection warp in the curve of a wine glass. And the reviews are universally terrible. Victoria arrived at 7:50, like a hurricane making landfall. All kinetic energy and devastation, potential. She wore Cartier, or what Alistair assumed was Cartier, the love bracelet catching candlelight as she checked her phone for the 4th time before even sitting down. Her dress was Alexander Wang, her hair was professionally blown out, and her expression was the specific type of boredom that costs $600 an hour to cultivate with the right therapist. Eli, right? She didn't wait for confirmation before sliding into the booth, her Michael Kors clutch, also probably rented, though Alistair had no way of knowing this, landing on the table with deliberate weight. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was absolutely psychotic coming from the Gold Coast. She lived in Lakeview. Alistair had seen the address on her dating profile. The Gold Coast reference was performance, a verbal designer label, meant to establish hierarchy before appetizers arrived. No problem, Alistair said and meant it. Every minute she hadn't been here was a minute he hadn't had to endure her evaluation. The first microaggression arrived with the wine list. Alistair reached for the leather-bound folder, a gesture of basic courtesy, and Victoria actually laughed, a sharp performative sound engineered for maximum condescension. Oh, honey, no. Let me handle this. She plucked the list from his fingers. I'm guessing your budget is more. Olive Garden. She didn't wait for his response. Her manicured finger, gel polish, probably $40 at some Logan Square salon she'd review, poorly on Yelp, traced down the Italian Reds section, landing deliberately on the most expensive option. We'll have the 2015 Barolo, the Giacomo Conterno. She pronounced it with the careful precision of someone who'd practiced in front of YouTube videos. For his benefit, the server smiled professionally, disappeared. Victoria turned her attention to Alistair with the clinical interest of a marine biologist examining something disappointing under a microscope. So, photo editing. And she said it the way someone might say sewer maintenance or timeshare sales, like retouching Instagram influencers making their pores disappear. More corporate work. Product photography. Some architectural. The sound was dismissive, final. And you live in Lincoln Park? That's such a sweet neighborhood. Garden apartment or, wait, her eyes widened with performative horror. Do you have roommates? The disgust in her voice was palpable. A living thing that crawled across the table and died between the breadbasket and the artisanal olive oil. Alistair felt something harden in his chest, a familiar calcification of dignity turning to stone. Studio, I live alone. Oh, Victoria's phone buzzed. She answered it mid-conversation, holding up one finger to silence him. Hey, babe. No, I'm just on a charity thing. Yeah, totally. See you at Soho House later. She hung up, made eye contact. Didn't apologize. The meal continued in this fashion, a slow-motion car crash where Alistair was both driver and spectator, unable to look away from the wreckage of his own optimism. Victoria ordered the Chilean sea bass without checking the price, $48, asked invasive questions about his income, phrased as curiosity, and spent 12 consecutive minutes explaining her Instagram strategy for monetizing authentic lifestyle content. When the check arrived, $287 for a meal Alistair had barely touched, Victoria performed the ritual he'd come to recognize across 13 previous dates. She reached for her clutch with theatrical slowness, her hand hovering above the zipper before stopping entirely. Actually, you know what? I think the man should pay on a first date. It's traditional. Her smile was razor wire wrapped in rose petals. You can manage this, right? The implication hung in the air. You can't manage this. You're going to embarrass yourself. I'm enjoying watching you squirm. Alistair pulled cash from his inner jacket pocket. Crisp $100 bills from the money clip he kept for exactly these moments. He paid without flinching, left a 20% tip, and watched Victoria's eyes narrow with suspicion. Interesting, she murmured. Photo editing must be really lucrative lately. They walked to the valet stand in silence, punctuated only by the percussion of her Louboutin heels against wet pavement. The attendant brought Alistair's car around first. The 2008 Honda Civic, with its dented bumper, missing hubcap, and coexist sticker peeling at the corners. Victoria stopped walking, stared, pulled out her phone. Wait, that's yours? Alistair watched her angle the phone for a photo, framing the shot to capture maximum pathetic detail. His car, his failure, his humiliation, packaged for social media consumption. You know what? Victoria's voice dripped false sweetness like honey laced with arsenic. I just remembered I have an early Pilates session tomorrow. I'll Uber home. And she was already typing, her thumbs flying across the screen. Alistair caught a glimpse. A photo of his car, caption beginning with, when he says he's a freelancer, but before she angled the phone away, she left him standing in the rain. Alistair sat in his car for 7 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching wealthy couples flow into Siena Tavern like a river of cashmere and confidence. His phone buzzed against his thigh. A text from his VP of Operations at Vale Light Technologies. Board meeting, moved to 9 a.m. The Centurion acquisition needs your signature. We're looking at $140 million. $140 million, richer by Monday. Couldn't get a second date on Thursday. He started the engine, pulled into traffic, and drove without destination through streets slick with rain and failure. Somehow, muscle memory or divine intervention or the geographical inevitability of a city laid out grids, he ended up on West Armitage Avenue in Logan Square, parked outside a diner he'd passed 100 times but never entered. Stella's Corner Diner. Chrome and red vinyl, neon sign flickering in cursive. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see warm light, a few scattered customers, and a waitress with dark curly hair, laughing with an elderly man at the counter as she refilled his coffee. With the kind of genuine warmth Victoria had weaponized and discarded, the woman looked up, caught him staring, smiled, not calculating, not measuring, not judging, just smiled. Alistair turned off the engine. Something about that smile felt like permission to stop running. He got out of the car, crossed the street, pushed open the diner door. A bell chimed above his head. The smell of coffee and apple pie and fryer grease enveloped him like absolution. The waitress, her name tag read Seraphina in faded capital letters, looked up from wiping down the counter. Hi there, hun. Sit anywhere you like. For the first time, in 14 dates, Alistair felt something dangerous and fragile unfold in his chest. Hope. The diner smelled like second chances and simple carbohydrates. Alistair slid into a red vinyl booth near the window, the material cracking softly under his weight like old leather that had absorbed decades of tired bodies, seeking refuge. Outside, rain continued its percussive assault on Chicago, but inside Stella's Corner Diner, the world contracted to something manageable. Formica countertops, worn smooth by a million elbows, chrome napkin dispensers reflecting fractured light, and a Wurlitzer jukebox in the corner playing Etta James at a volume that suggested comfort rather than performance. 9:15 p.m. Late enough that the dinner rush had dissolved, early enough that the true insomniacs and third-shift workers hadn't yet claimed their territories. A truck driver sat at the counter, methodically working through a slice of lemon meringue pie. A college student occupied a corner booth, buried under textbooks and highlighters in neon colors that hurt to look at directly. An elderly couple shared a single dessert with 2 forks and the comfortable silence of people who'd run out of things to say 40 years ago and found peace in it. Seraphina Cruz approached with a coffee pot in one hand and the weary but genuine smile of someone who'd seen every variation of human suffering play out across these tables and still chose kindness. She was 26, though Alistair wouldn't learn this until later. Dark curls pulled into a messy bun that had given up structural integrity around hour 6 of her shift. The diner's retro uniform, powder blue dress, white apron with grease stains, no amount of bleach could fully erase, hung on her frame in a way that suggested she'd lost weight recently. Or maybe the uniform had belonged to someone larger and the diner couldn't afford replacements. Her sneakers were so worn, the brand name had faded to ghost impressions, and her eyes were the deep brown of expensive coffee. With smile lines that suggested she laughed more than circumstances probably warranted. Rough night? She poured coffee without waiting for confirmation, the stream hitting porcelain with the practiced precision of someone who could do this blindfolded during an earthquake. Alistair looked up, surprised by the perceptiveness. That obvious? Honey, I've worked here 6 years. I can spot heartbreak, job loss, or bad dates from across the room. She said it kindly, conspiratorially, like they were allies in some unspoken resistance against the world's casual cruelties. You've got the bad date slump, shoulders all hunched like you're trying to disappear into your jacket. As he laughed despite himself, the sound rusty from disuse. Is it the sad aura or the wet clothes? Both. Plus, you're gripping that menu like it personally insulted your mother. She glanced at the Formica-top table beside her. My break started 2 minutes ago. Lasts exactly 15. Mind if I sit? She didn't wait for permission, sliding into the opposite side of the booth with the efficient grace of someone accustomed to stealing rest in 30-second increments. So, Seraphina said, folding her arms on the table, coffee, an existential crisis, or do you actually want food? And somehow, despite the armor he'd built across 14 failed dates, despite the carefully maintained walls between Alistair Vale and Eli Morgan, he found himself talking. Really talking. He told her about tonight's disaster, editing out Victoria's name and the specific restaurant but keeping the emotional truth intact. She looked at me like I was wasting her time. He finished quietly. Seraphina's expression shifted. Not pity, which he couldn't have tolerated, but recognition. People like that. They're scared. They measure everything in price tags because they don't know how to measure actual worth. She refilled his coffee from the pot she'd set on the table. You dodged a bullet. Doesn't feel like it. Give it a week. Bullets hurt less when you're not actively bleeding out in some fancy restaurant. As the metaphor was violent and perfect, Alistair felt something unknot in his chest. You should write that down, he said. That's better than most therapy I've paid for. Yeah, well, waitressing is just therapy where you get tipped. She grinned. Speaking of which, you want pie? We make a mean apple. Maybe in a minute. Tell me about you. What do you do when you're not diagnosing strangers' romantic failures? Graphic design. Studying it, anyway. Night classes at community college. She said it with a slight defensive edge, like she expected judgment. Squeezing homework between shifts. But can I see your work? She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. An iPhone 8 with a cracked screen protector and a case decorated with hand-drawn sunflowers. Her Instagram loaded, at Seraphina Designs. Alistair scrolled through her portfolio with the trained eye of someone who'd minored in fine arts at Northwestern, though he'd never tell her that. Her work was exceptional. Hand-lettered quotes with Art Nouveau flourishes, vintage-inspired logos for small businesses, a series of illustrations reimagining Chicago landmarks as watercolor postcards. There was real talent here, the kind that usually got cultivated at expensive design schools and launched into prestigious agencies. This is incredible, he said, and meant it with the full weight of his professional assessment. She blushed, the color rising in her cheeks. It's just a hobby. Pays a few bills when I get lucky with commissions. It shouldn't be a hobby. This is professional grade work. The compliment landed differently than the usual customer flattery. Seraphina studied him, this rumpled, rain-soaked stranger who'd actually looked at her designs instead of at her body. Or through her, transparent wallpaper. Her phone buzzed. A text notification flashed across the screen before she could swipe it away. Lucian blue heart. Sarah, they sent another letter about the academy. Can we talk when you get home? The light in her eyes dimmed fractionally. She silenced the phone, stood adjusting her apron with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Break's over, but I'm here most nights if you need a judgment-free zone. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Tips are better when customers actually smile. I might take you up on that. Please do. Alistair ordered the apple pie. Stayed until closing at 11 p.m., left a $40 tip on an $8 check, driving to his penthouse, He realized he hadn't thought about Victoria once after minute 12. 3 weeks passed in the rhythm of late-night coffee and conversation that felt like archaeology, each question carefully excavating layers of a person neither of them had shown anyone else. Tuesday nights became ritual. Alistair would arrive at Stella's around 11 p.m. after the dinner crowd had scattered and before the graveyard shift workers claimed their usual stools. He'd order coffee, black, no sugar, the kind of simple that made Seraphina shake her head and mutter, "Masochist," and spread his laptop across the booth like he was working on photo editing projects instead of reviewing merger proposals that would make him richer by millions. Thursday nights, Seraphina learned he'd grown up in Lincoln Park. Mostly, he'd said, which was technically true. His childhood home had been there before his mother married Marcus Vale, and their world expanded into penthouses and private equity. The word mostly carried decades of complexity he couldn't unpack without unraveling his entire cover story. Saturday night, week 2, Lucian appeared. The kid was 16, all elbows and Adam's apple, wearing a threadbare hoodie that read, Science Olympiad Regionals 2024, in faded letters. He carried a physics textbook that looked college level, the spine cracked from repeated readings, pages flagged with torn notebook paper covered in equations that made Alistair's undergraduate engineering degree feel inadequate. Alistair watched Seraphina's face transform when her brother walked through that door. Every hard edge softened, every tired line erased by something that looked like fierce, protective love mixed with bone-deep exhaustion. She poured Lucian hot chocolate without asking, added extra whipped cream, refused his money with a look that said, "Don't you dare." "That your brother?" Alistair asked after Lucian left, after Seraphina returned to his booth with the coffee pot, in the particular quietness of someone trying not to cry. "Yeah, smart kid. Too smart for his own good sometimes." She smiled, but it was the smile people wore when pride and worry occupied the same space in their chest. He's going to change the world someday, if the world gives him half a chance. Alistair filed that information away in the part of his brain that collected puzzle pieces. 2 jobs: studying graphic design, raising a teenage brother alone, working herself into the ground. Monday, week 3. Seraphina asked him about dreams, and Alistair found himself lying through truth. "I want to do work that matters," he said, which was accurate. Vale Light Technologies built AI systems for nonprofit resource allocation. "I want to help people without them knowing I'm helping." Does that make sense? Like a rich anonymous donor? She laughed. "Those only exist in movies." "God, if only you knew," Alistair thought, touching the thimble pendant under his shirt, a nervous habit he'd developed, grounding himself in his mother's memory when the lies felt too heavy. "What about you?" he asked. "I want my own design studio, nothing huge, just a little space where I can work with local businesses, nonprofits, people who can't afford the big agencies." She stared into her coffee like it held prophecies. "But that's probably 10 years away, maybe 15. "Why so long?" She didn't answer, just smiled, that particular smile people used when the truth cost too much to speak aloud. Friday, week 3, everything shifted. Lucian appeared again during Seraphina's shift, this time carrying an envelope with a gold seal embossed in the corner. Alistair couldn't hear their conversation from his booth, but he watched the progression of emotions across Seraphina's face, like watching storm systems move across radar. Confusion, disbelief, joy so bright it hurt to witness, then collapse. She went pale. Lucian looked devastated. They spoke in urgent whispers for 7 minutes before Lucian left, shoulders hunched against weight no 16-year-old should carry. Seraphina returned to work with red-rimmed eyes and a smile made of broken glass. Alistair wanted to ask, almost asked. Stopped himself because respecting boundaries felt more important than satisfying curiosity. But Tuesday of week 4, she broke. "Can I tell you something ridiculous?" Seraphina slid into his booth without preamble during a slow shift, her hands shaking around her coffee mug. "Always. My brother got accepted to Northbrook Preparatory. It's this incredible STEM boarding school. Kids go to MIT, Caltech, everywhere. Full scholarship for tuition." Her voice cracked. "But there's still $22,000 a year in fees. Room and board, lab costs, equipment, everything else. And I have $3,800 in savings. Maybe another $1,000 if I sell my car, but then I can't get to my other job. So," she stopped, pressed her palms against her eyes. Alistair's hand moved instinctively toward his wallet. "I can write that check right now. I can solve this in 30 seconds. But Victoria's voice echoed in his memory. "You think you can buy everything." If he paid Lucian's fees, Seraphina would never see Eli Morgan again. She'd only see Alistair Vale's money, and whatever fragile thing was growing between them would shatter under the weight of obligation and suspicion. "I'm so sorry," he said instead, hating every inadequate word. That's impossibly unfair." "Yeah," she wiped her eyes. "Sorry, that was unprofessional." It was human. After she returned to work, Alistair sat frozen, his cooling coffee forgotten. His laptop screen displayed his personal banking dashboard, $47,283,419.18. He could change Lucian's life with a phone call, but he didn't know how to do it without destroying the only genuine connection he'd had in years. He opened a new browser tab, typed Anonymous Scholarship Program Chicago, then how to help someone without them knowing. The cursor blinked in the search bar like a heartbeat, waiting for him to decide who he wanted to be. Alistair sat in his Streeterville penthouse for the first time in 3 weeks, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Lake Michigan like an oil painting worth $8 million. His home office smelled like expensive minimalism. Leather, fresh coffee from a machine that cost more than Seraphina's monthly rent, and the particular emptiness of spaces designed for living but used only for surviving. He was supposed to be reviewing Vale Light's quarterly reports. The acquisition deal with Centurion Technologies had closed yesterday, depositing $127 million into various accounts he'd stopped checking unless Margaret reminded him. His executive assistant had sent 3 increasingly urgent emails about the product launch scheduled for next month. Instead, Alistair was on his 4th hour of researching private school financial aid structures, his browser history reading like a manual for anonymous philanthropy. How to donate without attribution from a third-party foundation establishment. Anonymous Scholarship Legal Requirements, Illinois. His phone rang. Margaret Reeves, 52, sharp as surgical steel, the only person at Vale Light who'd seen him cry once after his mother's funeral and never mentioned it again. Margaret, hypothetically, Alistair began. Sir, nothing you've done in 6 years has been hypothetical. Her voice carried the dry amusement of someone who'd learned to translate billionaire anxiety into actionable tasks. Fair. If someone wanted to donate to a private school's financial aid fund, anonymously, how would they structure it? Pause. He could hear her typing. Hypothetically, a donor could establish a needs-based grant through a third-party foundation. The school would never know the source, provided the paperwork was handled correctly. How quickly could we set something like that up? For you? 72 hours. 3 days felt like 3 years. When he thought about Seraphina picking up extra delivery shifts, about Lucian's face crumpling under the weight of impossible choices. Do it. I'll send you the details. The research consumed him like fever. Alistair discovered Northbrook Preparatory had a hidden potential fund. Legitimate but chronically underfunded, only $180,000 annually for 400 students. He obtained Lucian's entrance exam scores through connections he'd rather not examine too closely. 98th percentile physics, 96th mathematics, a published paper on renewable energy systems in a youth STEM journal. The kid was brilliant. The world needed him. And the world was about to crush him under $22,000 in fees that Alistair spent monthly on a wine cellar he never drank from. The barrier wasn't tuition, that was covered. It was the peripheral costs, $8,500 for boarding, $6,200 for lab fees, $4,800 for mandatory technology, $2,500 for miscellaneous expenses. The financial aid office had classified Lucian as high merit, moderate need, because Seraphina's combined income of $43,000 was technically above poverty line, despite supporting 2 people in one of America's most expensive cities. Alistair wanted to scream at the algorithmic cruelty of it. Instead, he built a solution in the shadows. Step 1. Margaret established the Rebecca M. Vale Memorial STEM Fund, $500,000 in initial assets, designated for first-generation immigrant students pursuing science. The connection to his mother was buried in paperwork deep enough that only a forensic accountant would find it. Step 2. Contact Northbrook Preparatory's development office through encrypted email, posing as a foundation representative. Inquire about exceptional candidates. Provide Lucian's student ID number. Suggest they re-review his financial aid package. Step 3. Wait. Waiting was torture. At the diner, Alistair watched Seraphina deteriorate across 2 weeks like time-lapse photography of flowers dying. She picked up weekend delivery driving, fell asleep during her break, face pressed against her folded arms, had hushed painful conversations with Lucian, where Alistair caught fragments, maybe community college. You've sacrificed enough. I'll figure it out. Her eyes went hollow. Her smile became performance art. Alistair wanted to tell her, I can fix this, I am fixing this. Please just hold on. But the plan was fragile. If it failed, he'd have to choose between maintaining his disguise and watching Lucian's future evaporate. Day 21. Seraphina's phone rang during her shift. She glanced at the screen. Northbrook Prep Admin. And her hand trembled so violently she nearly dropped it. She answered, stepped outside. Through the window, Alistair watched her face transform. Confusion, disbelief, then explosive joy that looked like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She rushed back inside, tears streaming, laughing and sobbing simultaneously. Eli, Eli. Some foundation, I don't even know who. They established a grant, and Lucian qualifies, and they're covering everything except $3,500. And I have that. Oh my God, I have that. She threw her arms around him. Inappropriate, necessary, human. Her sobs soaked through his shirt. Alistair held her, feeling her relief vibrate through both their bodies, thinking, this is the best and worst moment of my life. Best because he'd done it. He'd helped without strings attached. Worse because the lie was growing. Late that night, sitting in his car in the diner parking lot, Seraphina asked, "Do you believe in miracles?" Alistair looked at her, this woman who worked herself to bone, dust, who smiled, despite everything, who loved her brother more than oxygen. "I'm starting to," he lied. With Lucian's future secured, Seraphina transformed like a city after rainfall. The same streets, but everything brighter, cleaner, possible again. She brought her brother to meet Eli on a Tuesday night, week 13. Lucian arrived with the cautious suspicion of teenagers who'd learned too young that adults disappointed more often than they delivered. But when Alistair asked about his renewable energy project, genuinely asked, leaning forward with the focus he usually reserved for board meetings, the kid's wariness cracked open. "So you're using thermoelectric generators to capture waste heat from urban infrastructure?" Alistair clarified, his undergraduate engineering degree momentarily forgetting to hide itself. Lucian's eyes went wide. "Yeah, exactly. Most people don't understand the conversion efficiency potential." They talked for 40 minutes. Seraphina watched from behind the counter with an expression Alistair would replay in his memory for months. Surprised, grateful, and something softer he didn't have permission to name yet. The following Thursday, she gifted him a card. Hand-designed, naturally. A Chicago skyline rendered in delicate pen strokes, the words, "Sometimes the best thing a person can do is sit with you in the dark," lettered in her signature. Art Nouveau flourish. Alistair kept it in his wallet, behind his driver's license, where it pressed against his veil-like corporate card like a talisman against his own deception. But his other life, his real life, was accelerating toward collision. The Centurion acquisition closed on day 94. His net worth increased by $127 million overnight. Business Insider ran a profile. The Invisible Billionaire, Why Alistair Vale Shuns the Spotlight. As the article speculated about his reclusiveness, mentioned his mother's death, got most of the facts wrong, but the emotional truth, devastatingly right. He was invited to speak at the Four Seasons Tech Summit. Declined. His team exchanged confused emails. Alistair never did public events anyway, but usually he made token appearances for investor relations. Margaret called. "Sir, people are starting to ask questions about your whereabouts, your availability." Tell them I'm focused on product development." "For 3 months straight?" "Yes," she sighed. Didn't push. Margaret had learned when to retreat. The double life was exhausting. Alistair lived in his Lincoln Park studio, 6 nights weekly, only returning to his penthouse for encrypted video calls with his executive team. He lost 12 pounds. Stopped sleeping properly. His reflection in bathroom mirrors looked like someone cosplaying as himself. Familiar features arranged, wrong, eyes belonging to a stranger. Then came the close call, day 103. Working at Stella's. 10:30 p.m., laptop open to emails from his CFO about final acquisition terms. His business phone rang. The unlisted number only senior leadership possessed. Caller ID, Valley Light, CFO, urgent. Seraphina glanced over from refilling sugar caddies. "You should get that." "It's fine, work stuff." His thumb hovered over decline. "Must be important if they're calling this late." He sent it to voicemail. 2 minutes later, a text blazed across his lock screen. "Alistair, board meeting moved to 7 a.m. tomorrow. Need you to review acquisition final terms. This is $140 million. Call me." The phone lay face up on the table. The text was visible. Seraphina was 3 feet away, wiping down the adjacent booth. Alistair's heart stopped. He watched her back, waiting for the pause, the turn, the moment she'd see his real name glowing in LED light. But she was humming along to Patsy Cline on the jukebox, oblivious. He grabbed the phone, excused himself to the bathroom, and spent 10 minutes in a stall that smelled like industrial cleaner, making decisions about $140 million while standing next to a broken hand dryer covered in Sharpie graffiti. Later that week, Seraphina asked about his family. "My mom passed when I was 23, he said. Truth. What did she do? She was a seamstress. Truth. And your dad? Tech entrepreneur, also gone. Truth wrapped in omission. That must have been hard, being alone so young. Alistair touched the thimble pendant through his shirt. Yeah, it was. Seraphina reached across the table, squeezed his hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused from work, real in a way nothing in his penthouse ever felt. We're both orphans then. Guess that's why we get each other. The intimacy was unbearable. She was offering her whole self. He was editing his truth into acceptable fiction. Walking to his car later, Alistair opened his phone, found the draft text he'd written, and deleted 47 times. I need to tell you something. My name isn't Eli Morgan. I'm Alistair Vale. I own a tech company. I set up Lucian's grant. I've been lying since we met, but my feelings for you are real. I'm so sorry. His thumb hovered over send. He deleted it. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow I'll tell her. Across the street, unseen, Victoria Harrington Cross sat in a wine bar, scrolling through her phone. She'd seen someone who looked exactly like her failed date exiting Vale Light Technologies that afternoon, flanked by men in suits. She zoomed in on the photo she'd taken, smiled slowly. Well, well, she murmured. Eli Morgan, or whoever the hell you really are. Victoria Harrington Cross sat in her Lincoln Park apartment, a carefully curated space that photographed better than it lived, editing her latest Instagram post when she scrolled through her camera roll and stopped. The photo from earlier today? The man exiting Vale Light Technologies? She zoomed in. Same facial structure, same dark hair, but this version wore Tom Ford. This version moved with the confidence of someone who owned the air around him. She opened her dating app, found Eli Morgan, compared photos. No fucking way. And Victoria's fingers flew across her keyboard. Google, Alistair Vale Light. Limited press, he was famously private, but enough. Forbes profile from 2023. Grainy photo from a tech summit. Mentions of an $840 million valuation. The LinkedIn photo matched Eli's bone structure. Same slight scar above his left eyebrow. Same hands that had counted out hundreds to pay for dinner he could barely afford. Except he could afford it. Could afford everything. Had been playing poverty like community theater. Victoria didn't feel humiliated. She felt robbed. I could have been married to a billionaire. I sat across from $840 million and called him mediocre. Her blog post went live at midnight, titled, When Rich Men Cosplay as Poor to Test Your Gold Digger Potential. Ladies, I discovered something wild. That broke guy I told you about, the one with the sad car, he's a billionaire running some twisted social experiment. He's literally testing women to see if we're gold diggers. Well, guess what, Alistair Vale? Some of us have standards. We reject men who lie, not men who are poor. The post was deleted 6 hours later after Vale Light's attorneys sent a cease and desist. But Victoria had tasted blood. 2 days later, she found him. 10:15 p.m. at Stella's Diner in Logan Square. Of course, the poverty cosplay extended to his dining choices. She walked in wearing full armor, designer everything, makeup perfect, the exact opposite of whatever authentic girl aesthetic she assumed he wanted. She slid into his booth without invitation. Hello, Eli. Or should I say Alistair? The man across from her went rigid. The waitress, tired, pretty in that working-class way men found non-threatening, approached. Ma'am, if you're not ordering, Victoria's eyes cut to her. Took in the uniform, the sensible shoes, the exhaustion, laughed. Oh my God, this is perfect. You're dating the help? Is this part of the experiment? Victoria, leave. His voice was ice. Does she know? Victoria looked at the waitress. Does she know that Eli, the struggling photographer, is actually Alistair Vale, Billionaire Tech CEO? The waitress's face drained of color. What? Victoria pulled out her phone, showed her the Forbes article. This is who you've been serving coffee to, sweetie. This is who's been playing pretend. The waitress looked at the phone. At him, back at the phone. Sarah, please. Don't. Her voice broke. Don't call me that. Victoria was performing now, addressing the entire diner. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Alistair Vale. Net worth $900 million. He's been slumming it in Logan Square to see if anyone would love him while pretending to be broke. The waitress, Sarah, apparently, removed her apron. I'm taking my break. She walked out. Alistair followed. Sarah, wait. She whirled on him in the parking lot. Was any of it real? The conversations? The grant? Did you set up that grant? Silence. Oh my God. You did. She backed away. I need to think. Don't follow me. Don't call. Just don't. Victoria watched from the window, satisfied. Sometimes karma served herself. Alistair didn't go to the diner, respected her boundaries even as it killed him. 4 days passed like open wounds. He couldn't focus on board meetings, snapped at his VP of engineering over minor code reviews. Margaret asked if he was okay. He wasn't. Day 5, he drove past Stella's at 3 a.m. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. She'd switched to day shifts to avoid him. Day 7 was Lucian's move-in day at Northbrook Preparatory. Alistair received an email. As the anonymous donor of the Rebecca M. Vale Memorial STEM Fund, he was invited to orientation. He shouldn't go. It bordered on stalking. He went anyway. Parked 200 yards from the main entrance, watched through binoculars as Seraphina helped Lucian carry boxes into the dormitory. She was smiling for her brother. But even from that distance, Alistair could see the exhaustion carved into her shoulders. Day 11, his doorman called at 11 p.m. "Sir, there's a Seraphina Cruz here to see you." She arrived in jeans and a hoodie, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. Still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. They stood in his foyer, the ridiculous opulence suddenly shameful. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art worth more than her annual salary, furniture that cost more than dignity should allow. "I need to tell you something," Seraphina said. "I know. I'm sorry. I knew who you were." Alistair blinked. "What?" "I've known for 2 weeks, since day 106. She showed him a screenshot. "You left your laptop open. I saw the Vale Light logo in your email. I Googled you during my break." And the floor tilted. "You knew?" "Yeah." "Then why didn't you say anything?" Her eyes filled. "Because I wanted to see what you'd do. If you'd try to buy me, if you'd flash money around, if you'd use the grant to manipulate me into dating you." Her voice broke. "I watched you keep playing broke, keep pretending, and I was so mad, but also, I was falling for you. And Sarah, when Victoria exposed you, I wasn't mad because you lied. I was mad because I'd lied too. We were both pretending." She stepped closer. "But then I went home, and I looked at Lucian's acceptance packet. And I realized, you could have written a check. You could have offered money directly. You could have made me feel small and grateful and indebted. But you didn't. You hid behind a foundation. You let me think it was a miracle. You gave my brother a future without taking my dignity. So I'm here to ask why." Alistair told her everything. His mother, the inheritance battle, the gold digger accusations, Rebecca's death, 14 failed dates, Victoria's cruelty. "I was terrified," he whispered, "that if you knew, you'd see dollars instead of a person. I'm not your mother, and you're not your father." "I know, but trauma doesn't care about logic." Silence stretched between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Then Seraphina said, "I don't want your money. I don't want penthouses or any of it." Alistair's heart sank. "But I want you. The guy who sits in a diner until midnight because he's lonely. The guy who reads my brother's science papers like they matter. The guy wearing his dead mother's thimble around his neck." She'd seen it. Of course she had. "Can we start over?" she asked. "No lies. No tests. Just us?" Alistair exhaled for the first time in days. "I'd like that." Seraphina woke to 847 Instagram notifications. Victoria's post had gone nuclear, 89,000 likes, 12,000 comments, a narrative crafted with surgical precision. The caption, "Update, the gold digger waitress knew all along. They deserve each other." The comments were a firing squad. "She's just as fake as him. How much is he paying you?" "Gold digger. Confirmed." Seraphina's hands shook scrolling through the hate. Her personal Instagram, her design portfolio, her livelihood was being carpet-bombed with anonymous cruelty. Alistair wanted to sue. His legal team had a cease and desist drafted within the hour. "Don't," Seraphina said. "It'll make it worse. She wants a reaction." "She's destroying your reputation." I work at a diner. I don't have a reputation to destroy." Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her. "This is what people like her do. They can't win, so they burn everything down." Victoria didn't stop. She sold the story to Chicago Scene Daily for $5,000. Appeared on a podcast spinning narratives about toxic billionaires manipulating working-class women. Found Northbrook Prep's Instagram and left comments on photos of new students. Hope that scholarship was worth your sister selling her soul. The breaking point came on day 4. Lucian called, crying. Other students had seen the comment. Someone showed him Victoria's blog post dissecting his scholarship as evidence of corruption. "Did you really know he was rich? Did you date him for my scholarship?" "No, baby." "God, no." "Then why didn't you tell him you knew? Why does everyone think you're a liar?" The line went dead. Seraphina collapsed. Alistair held her while she sobbed into his chest. "She's destroying my relationship with my brother. The one thing I did right." "Do you trust me?" Alistair asked. "Yes." "Then let me fix this. Not with money, with truth." And the press conference was held at Vale Light headquarters. Alistair's first public appearance in 18 months. Reporters packed the room. Victoria sat in the back row, smug, expecting corporate deflection. Instead, Alistair told the truth. "My name is Alistair Vale. After my mother was called a gold digger for loving my father, something broke in me. I created a fake identity to find someone who'd love me without the billion-dollar asterisk. Seraphina Cruz discovered my identity before I told her, and for that, she's being called a liar, and worse. But here's what actually happened." He held up documents for cameras. The Rebecca M. Vale Memorial STEM Fund, established weeks before Seraphina knew his identity. Time-stamped emails to Northbrook Preparatory, text messages showing she never once asked for money, Seraphina works 2 jobs to support her orphaned brother, studies graphic design at night, tips out her own pay for elderly customers. She didn't know I was rich when she was kind to me. She knew I was lonely, and she sat with me anyway. When she discovered the truth, she didn't expose me. She didn't blackmail me. She waited to see if I'd use money to manipulate her. And when I didn't, when I helped her brother without expecting anything, she gave me a chance. So if you want to call someone a liar, call me. If you want to call someone manipulative, call me. But leave Seraphina Cruz alone. She's the most honest person I've ever met. The room erupted. Alistair walked off stage without answering questions. His phone buzzed. Seraphina, you didn't have to do that, Alistair. Yes, I did. Are we okay? Seraphina, come to the diner tonight. Let me buy you coffee for once. Victoria left the press conference pale. In the hallway, a man in an expensive suit stopped her. Ms. Harrington Cross, Vale Light Legal Team, we'd like to discuss your defamatory statements. Do you have legal representation? Victoria's face went white. The narrative was shifting. Finally. The press conference went viral in reverse. Sympathy flooding toward Alistair and Seraphina like a tide, reversing course. Hashtags trended overnight. Hashtag Billionaire Heart, reclaimed from Victoria's. Mockery. Hashtag Seraphina deserves better. Hashtag Victoria is the problem. Comment sections transformed into defense forces. This man set up a whole scholarship fund and people are mad? Seraphina protected herself by staying quiet. That's smart, not manipulative. Victoria is everything wrong with influencer culture. Within 48 hours, Victoria lost 200,000 followers. 3 major brand sponsorships terminated their contracts. Her blog, Marry Up or Move On, was flooded with former followers exposing rented designer pieces, Photoshop editing, fake business school credentials. A Reddit thread titled Victoria Harrington Cross the Truth revealed her family's bankruptcy. The repossessed cars? The manufactured old money aesthetic built on credit card debt and delusion. Victoria's empire, built on envy and aspiration, collapsed under the weight of her own cruelty. But Alistair and Seraphina weren't watching. They were starting over. Day 127. Official first date. Alistair picked her up at her Pilsen apartment in the dented Civic. They went to Stella's diner, naturally. Dolores hugged them both. About damn time you two figured it out. Day 128, Seraphina visited Vale Light headquarters, met his team. Margaret gave her an approving nod and a knowing smile. No one mentioned the scandal. They treated her like she belonged, because she did. Day 129. Alistair attended Seraphina's night school design class. Her professor, a 67-year-old former ad executive, looked at his watch and said, "You better treat her right, son. Talented designers are rare." Alistair promised he would. Day 130. They visited Lucian at Northbrook Prep. The kid was thriving. Top of his physics class, already making friends, sketching renewable energy prototypes that looked like they belonged in MIT labs. Lucian pulled Alistair aside in the common room. "Did you really make that fun for me?" Alistair considered lying, chose truth. "Yeah. Why?" "Because your sister loves you, and I love her." Lucian studied him with the intensity of someone calculating molecular structures. "Okay, but if you hurt her, I know chemistry. I can make your life miserable." Alistair laughed. "Fair." That evening, they sat on Alistair's penthouse balcony overlooking Lake Michigan, sharing Lou Malnati's deep dish pizza on a $60,000 couch. "This is surreal," Seraphina said, sauce on her chin. "Which part?" "All of it. 3 months ago, I was drowning in bills. Now I'm dating a billionaire who eats pizza on furniture worth more than my car. For the record, the couch was $60,000, not more than your car." She threw a napkin at him. They laughed. It felt normal, real, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. His phone buzzed. Email from legal. Victoria Harrington Cross agreed to remove all defamatory content and issue a public apology in exchange for us dropping the lawsuit. He showed Seraphina. "What do you think?" She read it. "Let her apologize, but I don't need to see it." He deleted the email. "So," Seraphina said, taking his hand, "where do we go from here?" Alistair squeezed her fingers, calloused from work, warm with life, real in every way that mattered. "Wherever you want, as long as it's together." 6 months later, Alistair brought Seraphina back to Stella's diner on a snowy Tuesday night. Same booth, same time, 10:47 p.m. Dolores had cleared the space, dimmed the lights. Soft jazz played on the jukebox. "Why are we here?" Seraphina asked, though she was already smiling. "Because this is where I found you, where you saw me. Not the money, not the company, just me." He slid out of the booth, knelt on the worn checkered floor. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Seraphina Cruz, you're the first person who made me believe love isn't a transaction. You worked 3 jobs, raised your brother, built a creative career from nothing, and still had capacity to sit with a lonely stranger and make him feel human. I don't have a perfect speech. I just know I want to spend the rest of my life earning your trust every single day. Will you marry me? The ring was simple platinum with a single, ethically sourced diamond. Not ostentatious, just beautiful. She cried, "Yes, God, yet." They kissed in the booth where it all started. Dolores whooped from behind the counter. 1 year later, they married at the Chicago Botanic Garden in Glencoe. The ceremony bridged both worlds. Seraphina's design school classmates mixed with Vale Light executives. Stella's diner staff laughed with Silicon Valley investors. Her childhood friends from Pilsen danced with his business partners who'd become genuine friends. Seraphina wore a dress she'd designed herself, ivory silk with hand-embroidered details. Alistair wore the thimble pendant visible over his heart for the first time in public. Lucian gave her away, now 17 and thriving. His best man speech made the entire garden cry. When our parents died, Sarah became everything. Parent, provider, protector. She gave up college, sleep, dreams, everything for me. For 7 years, I watched her carry weight no one should carry alone. Then this guy showed up, and at first I thought, rich dude, probably gonna break her heart. But he didn't. He saw her. Really saw her, not the tired waitress or the struggling designer. He saw the strongest, kindest person I know. Alistair, you gave my sister something she'd forgotten how to have. Hope. So thank you. And also, if you hurt her, I still know chemistry. Laughter rippled through the garden. Margaret's maid of honor speech was equally devastating. I've worked for Alistair 7 years. I've seen him build an empire and hide from the world. But when he met Seraphina, something changed. He started living instead of surviving. Seraphina, you gave my boss his humanity back. And they danced to La Vie en Rose. Alistair whispered, I'm terrified I'll step on your dress. I don't care about the dress. I care about this. She touched the thimble pendant. My mother would have loved you. I would have loved her. As night fell, they slipped away to a quiet corner, sat on a bench overlooking the pond, still in their wedding clothes. Are you happy? Alistair asked. Deliriously. No regrets? She kissed him. Not one. Behind them, through the glass conservatory, their guests danced. Billionaires and waitresses. CEOs and artists, all moving to the same music. People ask what it's like being a billionaire. They expect talk of yachts and power. But here's what wealth taught Alistair. It's worthless if you're measuring the wrong things. His mother measured love in hours spent together, meals cooked, seams sewn with care. Seraphina measured worth in kindness given, dignity preserved, promises kept. He'd spent years hiding behind money, afraid it was all anyone would see. But the truth was simpler. The right person doesn't see your bank account. They see your heart. And if you're lucky, impossibly lucky, they see you're worthy, even when you've forgotten. That's the billionaire heart, not the money. The capacity to love and be loved despite everything you've convinced yourself is wrong with you. Seraphina rested her head on his shoulder. Her ring caught moonlight. The thimble pendant rested against his heart. Ready to start our life? She asked. I've been ready since the day you sat across from me and didn't ask for anything except my company. As they stood, walked back toward the light, toward laughter, toward the future, together. We live in a world obsessed with measuring net worth, social status, follower counts, the square footage of our homes and the thread count of our sheets. We've convinced ourselves that these numbers define our value, that wealth equals worth, that accumulation equals accomplishment. But here's what Alistair and Seraphina's story whispers to us in the quiet moments. The most profound, wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts. Real wealth is sitting with someone in their darkness without trying to fix them. It's helping without needing credit. It's choosing dignity over charity, connection over transaction, authenticity over performance. Alistair's billions couldn't buy him what Seraphina's kindness freely gave. The permission to be seen, truly seen in all his broken, grieving human complexity. And Seraphina's poverty couldn't diminish what she offered with such abundance. Compassion, integrity, the fierce protective love that asked nothing in return. In the end, they both learned the same lesson. We don't need to hide our wealth or our poverty, our strength or our struggle. We need to be brave enough to be seen, fully, honestly, without the masks we wear to protect ourselves from disappointment. The billionaire heart isn't about how much money you have. It's about how much love you're willing to risk. It's about measuring what matters. Moments of genuine connection, acts of invisible kindness, the quiet courage of showing up as yourself and hoping that's enough. And for the right person at the right time, it always is. Content disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. All characters, businesses, locations, events, and incidents are either products of imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, companies, or events is purely coincidental.